My name is Thomas Reed. I am 64 years old, and 3 months ago, I closed the door on a career that spanned more than 3 decades. For 35 years, I worked as the Chief Operations Manager at Lone Star Logistics, one of Texas's largest energy transport firms. I was never the loudest man in the boardroom, never the one pounding his fist on the table or demanding attention. My reputation was built on calm judgment, long nights poring over data, and the steady hand that kept multi-million-dollar projects from going off the rails. They called me the anchor of the company, the man who didn't sink when storms came. Yet if you had asked me what mattered most in my life, I would not have said the job, the paychecks, or even the recognition. I would have said my family. Helen, my wife of nearly 40 years, and our 2 children, Michael and Claire. They were the center of every decision, every sacrifice. Each promotion I accepted, each bonus I deposited, I thought first about them. When Michael wanted to pursue his MBA in Boston, I wrote the checks, without hesitation, $75,000 across 2 years, money I could have invested elsewhere, but never questioned. When Claire dreamed of opening her art gallery in downtown Austin, I co-signed the lease and fronted her the initial $150,000 to get it off the ground. And Helen, well, for her I believe there should be no limits. Each summer I took her to Europe to see the cathedrals of Paris, the canals of Venice, the hills of Tuscany. She changed cars every other year, her choice always a gleaming Lexus or Audi. We bought a sprawling home in Barton Creek, a house filled with light, marble countertops and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the hills. I thought that was happiness. I thought I was giving them the life they deserved. And in truth, I convinced myself that I was lucky too, that even if my days were swallowed by spreadsheets and sleepless nights, it was worth it, because I was building something for the people I loved. But in the final year before retirement, I noticed something change. Helen became distant. She was still there, physically, still sitting across from me at the dinner table, but her eyes rarely met mine. She was always on her phone, whispering in corners, conversations that stopped the instant I walked into the room. I told myself it was nothing. After all, after 4 decades of marriage, people change, rhythms change. Perhaps she just needed her space. Michael, too, had changed. He asked me questions in a tone that felt less like curiosity and more like calculation. "Dad, what's going to happen to your pension? How much do you keep in your retirement accounts? Do you have life insurance through the company?" It was strange, almost clinical, as though he were conducting a financial interview rather than talking to his father. Claire was subtler, but her inquiries cut just as deep. "Dad, you'll still help cover the gallery expenses after you stop working, right?" she asked one evening, sipping wine in our kitchen. "Because with the economy right now, it's not easy to stay afloat." At first, I brushed it all aside. Families talk about money. Perhaps they were just anxious about the future. But deep down, something in me stirred uneasily. I had spent my entire adult life reading reports, spotting discrepancies others overlooked, noticing patterns no one else could see. And suddenly, I realized I was spotting them in my own home. Whispers, glances, questions that didn't add up. Still, I kept faith. I told myself that retirement would bring us closer. I dreamed of driving across the country with Helen in the new RV we had purchased, visiting national parks, seeing the grandchildren I hoped we would soon have. I imagined mornings where I could sit on the porch with coffee, Helen by my side, and no deadlines hanging over me. For 35 years, I gave the best of me to the company and to my family. I believed that loyalty meant something, that sacrifice would be remembered, that love was a ledger that balanced if you poured enough into it. But as I would soon learn, the numbers in my life didn't add up the way I thought. Behind the soft conversations, behind the smiles at my farewell party, there was a truth waiting to strike. And when it came, it shattered not only the life I had built, but the man I thought I was. I did not yet know it on that spring evening in Austin, but my farewell party would become something else entirely. Not a celebration of a career well lived, not a toast to a new chapter of travel and peace. It would be the night my family revealed who they really were. And it would be the night I began my transformation from the man they thought they could discard to someone they would never forget. The day of my farewell party arrived, with sunlight spilling over the hills of Austin, as if the Texas sky itself was trying to mark the moment. I had imagined this day for months, though not with vanity or ego. I had worked too long, too quietly, to expect parades or medals. What I pictured was simple: family, friends, colleagues who had walked beside me through years of deadlines and crises, raising glasses together for one night of gratitude and closure. The party was held at a friend's ranch on the edge of town, a wide spread of oak trees and open fields where the air smelled faintly of cedar and barbecue. Neighbors brought lawn chairs, colleagues carried bottles of wine, and a string of lanterns swayed overhead as the sun dropped lower. Helen had overseen the arrangements. She wore a pale blue dress that caught the light and smiled at everyone who passed, but when her eyes met mine, the smile faltered, like a painting with cracks beneath the varnish. I ignored it. I wanted the night to be a memory of joy. I laughed with coworkers who retold old stories: the time I caught an error that saved a project from collapsing, the years I spent mentoring younger staff. Michael shook hands like a politician, telling everyone about his consulting work. Claire hovered near the makeshift stage, talking about an upcoming art exhibit. I looked around, thinking, this is it. My life's work, my legacy, is here, in these people, in my family. Then Helen walked toward me, a manila envelope pressed flat in her hands. "Thomas," she said, her voice clear enough that conversations nearby paused, "I have a retirement gift for you." A ripple of silence spread across the tables. I reached for the envelope, expecting a photo album, maybe letters from old friends. Something sentimental. My fingers slipped under the flap and I pulled out the first page. It was not a photo album, it was divorce papers. For a moment, the words blurred into nonsense. Petition for dissolution of marriage, irreconcilable differences, division of assets, alimony. The phrases screamed at me in black ink under the warm glow of lanterns. My throat tightened as I felt every pair of eyes on me. I looked up. Helen leaned closer, her smile frozen in place but her eyes as cold as stone. She whispered, so soft that only I could hear, "I will not spend the rest of my life babysitting a retiree. You understand, don't you?" Her perfume carried the faint sweetness of lavender, but her words were pure venom. My hand trembled, but I forced it still. I was the man who steadied storms. I would not break in front of them. Slowly, I folded the papers, slid them back into the envelope, and tucked it into the pocket of my blazer. That was when I noticed him, a man I had never seen before, standing near the fence, half in shadow, holding a glass of wine he had no business holding. His suit was sharp, but smugness sharper. He met my eyes and smiled, as though he were already inside my home, already replacing me. Helen had brought him here, to my farewell party, to the night meant to honor the decades I had given not just to my career, but to her. My eyes shifted to Michael and Claire. For a heartbeat I searched for outrage, for shock, for even the smallest flicker of solidarity, but what I saw froze me colder than Helen's whisper. They did not look surprised. They exchanged glances with each other, quick, silent, complicit. "You knew," I said softly, my voice cracking against the silence. Michael shrugged, adjusting the cuff of his shirt like this was a business deal. "Dad, you have to understand our position. Mom deserves to be happy. And we need to think about the future too." Claire nodded, her voice low but steady. "Your investments, your pension, the company stock, it's a lot to manage. Maybe it's better to leave it in the hands of people who understand how to use it." Her words sliced deeper than the papers in my pocket. They weren't just betraying me, they were already divvying me up like assets on a balance sheet. In that moment, a clarity washed over me sharper than any heartbreak. It wasn't about Helen's happiness. It wasn't about freedom or midlife dreams or the nonsense excuses they had rehearsed. It was about money, my money, the retirement I had spent decades building, the fortune I thought I was preserving for them. They saw it as theirs already. They believed I was weak, predictable, easy prey. The old retiree who would sign whatever was placed in front of him, who would fade into silence and eventually die, leaving them to inherit it all. But they had miscalculated. They had never truly known me. They only knew Thomas Reed, the husband, the father, the man who paid bills without complaint and signed checks with quiet loyalty. They had never met Thomas Reed, the strategist, the man who had spent a lifetime navigating crises no one else saw coming. So I smiled. It was not the smile of a broken man. It was the smile of a man filing information, cataloging betrayal, and already drafting the counter-strike. "All right," I said calmly. "I'll sign." Gasps fluttered among the guests. Helen's eyes widened for a split second before she masked it with relief. Michael exhaled like he had won a negotiation. Claire glanced at Victor Cross, the stranger at the fence, and gave the smallest nod. The party carried on, laughter resuming like nothing had happened. But I was elsewhere, detached, watching Helen laugh too brightly at Victor's jokes, watching my children whisper as if they were drawing up blueprints for my fortune. I sipped my drink, tasted the bitterness, and kept quiet. For them, this was the beginning of my end. For me, it was the beginning of something else entirely. They thought they had set the stage, that they controlled the play. What they didn't realize was that I was the one holding the script. And the performance they had written for me, the role of the discarded old man, was not the one I intended to play. 3 days after the party, I sat at the long oak table in my study, the envelope open in front of me. Helen's signature gleamed in ink at the bottom of the divorce petition. My own signature would go beside it. Most men, after a betrayal so public, so calculated, would have raged, begged, or broken down. I did none of those things. Instead, I smiled to myself, a small, tight smile that no one else would ever see. You see, while Helen and the children believed they had cornered me, what they didn't know was that I had been preparing for this moment for years, not because I expected betrayal, not at first, but because I had always been cautious, always suspicious of the fragility of fortune. 35 years in operations had taught me that disasters come without warning, and so, quietly, carefully, I built safety nets, not just for the company I worked for, but for myself. 7 years earlier, I began moving portions of my wealth into structures that even Helen couldn't trace. While she shopped for luxury handbags in Paris, I was filing paperwork in Oklahoma for a holding company that owned acres of farmland in Kansas. While Claire was showing me plans for her gallery in downtown Austin, I was buying mineral rights under a shell corporation in New Mexico. While Michael was boasting about his consulting clients, I was wiring money into European investment accounts under trusts registered in names no one connected to me. Helen thought she knew everything. She saw the Barton Creek house, the retirement accounts, the Lexus in the driveway, and she assumed that was the sum total of Thomas Reed's fortune. What she never saw was the map behind the curtain. LLCs stacked like dominoes, accounts scattered like seeds across continents, assets protected behind walls of legality she would never breach. So when I signed the divorce papers, I did it calmly. I allowed the visible assets to be divided according to Texas law. Helen received the house and half of the checking accounts. The children were given access to a trust filled with company stock and a portfolio of funds. On the surface, it looked like generosity. It looked like fairness. But beneath the surface, I knew exactly what I had handed them. Those company shares were already wobbling on the edge of decline. I had seen the forecasts. The high-risk funds I placed into the trust looked strong on paper, but I knew they were built on sand, inflated numbers propped up by short-term speculation. It was only a matter of time before they collapsed. To Helen and the children, it was a windfall. To me, it was a test. On the day we met in the lawyer's office, Helen sat across from me in a tailored navy dress, her eyes gleaming with triumph. Michael's grin was tight, like a man who believes he's finally taken the reins. Claire signed the last page with a flourish, almost smug. "See, Dad," she said softly as she slid the papers back. "This isn't so hard. Everyone gets what they need." I met her eyes and nodded. "Yes," I said, "everyone gets what they need." I rose from the table, shook the lawyer's hand, and walked out into the Austin heat. From that moment, the Thomas Reed they knew, the husband, the father, the provider, was gone. That night, I canceled my phone plan. I closed my social media accounts. I shut down the email addresses they used to reach me. By morning, I had packed 2 suitcases and loaded them into my truck. The Barton Creek house was no longer mine. The life I had built in Austin no longer existed. I drove west into hill country, past the limestone cliffs and the riverbeds, past the small towns with their diners and antique shops. Each mile felt like shedding a layer of old skin. By the time I reached a cabin I had quietly purchased a year earlier, 10 acres hidden near the Llano River, I was no longer the discarded retiree Helen thought she had thrown away. I was something new. Inside that cabin, bare except for a bed, a desk, and 3 computer monitors I had installed, I sat down and began to plan. Not as a man who had lost his family, but as a man who had finally been freed to fight with every ounce of skill he possessed. Helen, Michael, Claire, they thought they had won the game. What they didn't realize was that the board they were playing on was one I had built. And soon, they would learn just how costly it is to underestimate the man they thought they knew. The first night in the cabin, the silence pressed against me like a weight. In Austin, the nights were filled with traffic hum and city glow, the soft clink of Helen's wine glass, the faint buzz of Claire's gallery calls. But here, near the Llano River, there was only the cry of crickets and the distant rush of water against rock. At first, it was unnerving. Later, it became the sound of freedom. I woke before sunrise, pulled on boots, and stepped outside. The air was sharp with cedar and mesquite. For the first time in decades, I had no agenda, no meetings, no spreadsheets demanding answers. Just me, my truck, and a cabin hidden by oak trees. But I was not there to wither. Betrayal had carved me open, and I intended to rebuild stronger than ever. Inside the cabin, I set up my fortress. 3 monitors flickered with financial tickers and market feeds. Satellite internet gave me a direct line to global exchanges. My hands, once chained to corporate bureaucracy, were free to move my own money. I began small day trades, calculated risks, testing the waters. But years of analyzing balance sheets had given me instincts most investors lacked. I could see what others missed, and I could smell fraud before it collapsed. While others gambled on hype coins and viral stocks, I invested in what would endure. Renewable energy companies, building wind farms across the plains, artificial intelligence firms out of Silicon Valley, agritech startups transforming the way food was grown. I watched numbers climb like the steady rise of the river after rain. Within 6 months, I had doubled my initial capital. Within 18 months, my fortune was 3 times larger than what Helen believed I'd left behind. But this reinvention was not only about money, it was about reclaiming myself. At dawn, I hiked the rocky trails near the river. At noon, I cast lines into the current, letting the water soothe old wounds. At dusk, I lifted weights in the small shed I converted into a gym. My body, worn down by decades at a desk, began to change. Muscle replaced softness. Endurance replaced fatigue. At 65, I felt sharper, stronger than I had at 50. In the evenings, I taught myself piano from an old keyboard I bought in town. I carved furniture from oak scraps behind the cabin, shaping tables with my own hands. There was a joy in creation I had forgotten, a peace in building something tangible. It was during one of those evenings in town, when I stopped at a small book cafe, tucked between a bakery and an antique shop, that I met her. Her name was Mary Ann Clark. She was 56, a widow, her gray-streaked hair pulled back neatly, eyes that carried both kindness and sorrow. She owned the cafe, a place where shelves sagged under novels and poetry, and the smell of fresh coffee lingered like comfort itself. Our first conversation began over a book I was buying, a worn copy of Steinbeck's East of Eden. "You know," she said with a smile that lit the dim shop, "people don't buy Steinbeck to be entertained. They buy him because they're searching for something." I looked at her for a long moment. "And what if I am?" "Then you're in the right place." We talked for 3 hours that night, sitting at a corner table while rain tapped against the windows. We spoke of books, of journeys abandoned and dreams deferred. She told me about losing her husband to cancer, about the loneliness of running a cafe alone. I told her almost nothing about Helen or the betrayal. I wasn't ready, but she saw something in me anyway. "You have the look of a man who has been broken," she said gently, "but not destroyed." Our conversations turned into walks, and walks into dinners. Weeks became months. The cabin that once echoed with silence now carried her laughter. For the first time since the party, I felt alive in a way that had nothing to do with revenge or money. By the time my portfolio had tripled again, I had already decided my life would no longer be measured by the people who discarded me, but by the new life I was choosing to build. One night, as we sat on the porch watching the river reflect the silver light of the moon, Marianne reached for my hand. "Thomas," she whispered, "do you ever regret what you left behind?" I thought of Helen's cold smile, Michael's shrug, Claire's nod to a stranger. I thought of the papers in my pocket and the man I had been before that night. "No," I said, my voice steady. "You can't regret something that was never real to begin with." The woman beside me squeezed my hand, and I realized I had not just escaped, I had begun again. And the man they thought they buried at that farewell party was becoming someone they would one day wish they had never betrayed. The seasons in Hill Country have a rhythm that I had never noticed before. Spring bursts green and alive, summer blazes with cicadas and relentless heat, autumn glows golden over the vineyards, and winter brings a rare hush when frost brushes the oaks. Each season marked not only the passing of time but the rebuilding of my life. By the second year in the cabin, my relationship with Marianne had deepened into something I no longer wanted to live without. She was more than company. She was a partner who saw through the armor I wore. She understood silence as well as conversation, sorrow as well as joy. We married quietly in Fredericksburg, inside a small courthouse with 2 witnesses we barely knew. There were no extravagant flowers, no tuxedos or champagne toasts. Just a simple exchange of vows and the certainty that we were choosing each other for who we were, not what we owned. I looked into her eyes and saw no greed, no calculation, only the steady promise of loyalty. After the wedding, I moved fully into her small home above the book cafe in Austin. For a time, we lived simply, surrounded by shelves of stories and the smell of roasted coffee. My investments, however, had grown to such proportions that a bigger step seemed inevitable. By then, 2 renewable energy companies I had quietly supported were acquired by Fortune 500 firms. Overnight, my stakes multiplied in value. Dividends rolled in month after month, far exceeding the salary I once earned at Lone Star Logistics. And yet, money alone didn't fill the spaces I had lost. It was Marianne who suggested we consider fostering. "There are so many children out there," she said one night as we walked through the vineyard I had just purchased, 400 acres of rolling land outside Marble Falls. "Children who need a home. You have so much to give, Thomas. Not money, presence, patience, the kind of steady love most men don't know how to offer." At first, I hesitated. My own children had betrayed me so thoroughly that the thought of becoming a father again seemed dangerous. But Marianne's conviction broke through my doubts. Months later, we met Lucas, a 10-year-old boy with wary eyes and a quiet voice. His biological parents had lost custody years earlier due to neglect. When he first came to live with us, he barely spoke. He kept his backpack zipped tight, as if ready to leave at any moment. But slowly, with patience and routine, walls began to crumble. I taught him to fish at the Llano River. Marianne read him bedtime stories until he fell asleep mid-sentence. We celebrated his 11th birthday with a cake so lopsided it nearly slid off the table, but he smiled as if it were a feast. One evening, as I tucked him into bed, he whispered the word I hadn't dared to expect: "Dad." The sound of it pierced me deeper than any betrayal had. For the first time in my life, I felt what it meant to be chosen as family, not obligated by blood, but trusted by love. Our life took on a new rhythm. Mornings were filled with laughter and spilled cereal in the kitchen. Afternoons carried the sound of Lucas racing down Vineyard Rows with our golden retriever, Scout, at his heels. Evenings glowed with the warmth of piano notes and Marianne's laughter echoing through the house. Meanwhile, my investments soared to heights I had never imagined. With every deal, I secured not just money, but independence. The vineyard became not only a retreat, but a thriving business. We hosted small tastings, partnered with local restaurants, and built a reputation for quality. Mary Ann expanded her cafe into 2 more Austin neighborhoods, each one bustling with students, readers, and dreamers. And yet, what made me feel richest wasn't the zeros on my bank statements. It was watching Lucas run across the fields with no fear in his eyes. It was hearing Mary Ann hum softly as she baked bread in the kitchen. It was sitting on the porch with a glass of our own wine, the sun setting over acres of land I never thought I would own, and realizing I was happy, truly happy, in a way Helen, Michael, and Claire had never allowed me to be. But life has a cruel symmetry. Just as my new family thrived, word began to trickle back about the old one. One crisp autumn morning, as Lucas left for school and Mary Ann kissed my cheek before heading to the cafe, my lawyer, Mr. Jennings, called. His voice carried the tension of news not yet spoken. "Thomas," he said, "there have been developments. I think you'll want to hear them." I leaned back in my chair, staring out at the endless rows of vines glowing gold in the sunday. For years, Helen and the children had believed they destroyed me at that farewell party. What they didn't know was that their collapse had only just begun, and I was about to hear every detail. The call from Mr. Jennings came on a late October morning, the kind where the air is crisp enough to sting your lungs, but the sky glows as though nothing could ever go wrong. I was sitting at the long oak table in the vineyard's main house, a cup of coffee steaming at my side, when I answered. His tone told me before his words did that something significant had unfolded. "Thomas," he said, "it seems your former family is in some trouble." A pause stretched between us. I felt no rush of vindication, no fire of anger, only curiosity. "Tell me," I said quietly. He exhaled. "It begins with Helen. The man she left you for Victor Cross, he wasn't who he pretended to be. He ran what looked like an import-export business out of Houston. Promised her guaranteed returns if she invested in his expansion. She gave him $300,000. He vanished within 6 months. No business, no office, nothing. The paperwork was forged. Even the name he used wasn't his real one." I sat back in my chair, staring out at the rows of vines, golden with autumn light. Helen had thought she was upgrading, trading a husband for a lover who offered excitement and wealth. Instead, she had traded stability for smoke. "She lost the Barton Creek house," Jennings continued. "Without your supplemental income, she couldn't maintain the mortgage. It went into foreclosure last year. She's renting a small duplex now. By all accounts, she's drowning." I closed my eyes for a moment. A man who had once built her palaces, who had once taken her to Paris, had been replaced by a man who stripped her of everything. Justice, I thought, rarely comes so neatly packaged. "And the children?" I asked. Jennings hesitated, as though arranging the words. "Michael, he was reckless. Invested heavily in a real estate development in Dallas, a new luxury high-rise project. He believed it was his chance to prove himself as more than your son. He leveraged everything. The money from the trust, loans against his house, even borrowed against his children's college fund. It was a scam. The developers skipped town. He's in debt over $600,000. The bank is circling. His home is days away from foreclosure." I pictured Michael, the boy who once begged me for a bike, the man who shrugged at me during my farewell party as though dismissing an employee who had outlived his usefulness. He had wanted control of the fortune, but when given the chance, he gambled it all away. "And Claire?" My voice was softer now. "Her gallery," Jennings said. "She expanded too fast. Opened 2 new locations in San Antonio, signed leases with astronomical rent. Then, the pandemic hit. Traffic dried up. Revenue collapsed. She owed more than she could pay. The original gallery is shuttered. She's being sued by her creditors. Total debt about $220,000. She's moved into Helen's duplex. They're living together now." For a moment, I felt the strangest sensation. Not triumph, not pity, but a hollow ache. They had destroyed themselves with the very weapons they had once tried to use against me: greed, entitlement, short-sightedness. Jennings cleared his throat. "They've been trying to reach you. Helen left 27 messages on my office voicemail just last week. Michael wrote me a 12-page letter begging me to put him in touch with you. Claire appeared in person. She said she's sorry, that she never should have sided with her mother, that you were right all along." I turned toward the window. Outside, Lucas was racing Scout across the vineyard rows, his laughter rising like music against the wind. Mary Ann's cafe delivery truck rolled down the dirt road, dust catching the morning light. My new life stood in sharp contrast to the ruins Jennings described. "They want you back," Jennings said. "Or at least, they want your help." "Help," I repeated softly, the word tasting bitter. When I was sitting at that party, surrounded by strangers, watching my wife hand me divorce papers, where was their help then? When they whispered about dividing my fortune as though I were already dead, where was their loyalty? Jennings was silent. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. "Tell them this. Thomas Reed does not wish to be contacted. If they persist, you are authorized to take every legal measure to protect my privacy. Do you understand?" "Yes," Jennings said. "But Thomas, if I may, are you certain? They sound desperate." I let the silence stretch, watching Lucas tumble into the grass, breathless and happy. Mary Ann stepped out of the truck, laughing as he ran to her. My chest tightened with something close to gratitude. "I'm certain," I said finally. "They chose their side that night. Now they can live with the cost." Jennings hesitated again, then asked quietly, "Do you feel any satisfaction in this?" I thought about it, really thought. The image of Helen's cold whisper, Michael's shrug, Claire's nod flickered through my mind. And then I looked out at my vineyard, my wife, my son, my dog, and the life I had built with my own hands. "Satisfaction? No," I said. "Relief, yes. Relief that I no longer have to wonder who they really are." That evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the vineyard in copper light, Mary Ann joined me on the porch. Lucas curled up with Scout at our feet. She touched my hand, saw the storm behind my calm expression. "What is it?" she asked. "The past is collapsing," I said, "exactly as it was always meant to." She squeezed my hand gently. "Then let it fall, Thomas. Let it fall." And I realized she was right. I didn't need vengeance. The world had delivered it for me. But I did need something else closure. And soon, I knew. I would send them one final message to make sure the door was closed forever. The decision to end it came one morning in early spring. The air outside smelled of wildflowers, and the vineyard shimmered with new green shoots. Lucas was practicing chords on the old piano, his small fingers stumbling but determined, while Mary Ann prepared breakfast in the kitchen. I stood by the window, the morning light spilling across the hardwood floor, and realized it was time to close the door for good. For years, I had allowed Helen and the children to call and write through Jennings. I hadn't answered, hadn't responded, but I had let the noise linger like static. They had begged, pleaded, even confessed, but silence alone was no longer enough. They needed to understand, without doubt, that there was no road back. I called Jennings. "I'm ready," I said. "Ready for what?" he asked, though I think he already knew. "The letter, the last word, drafted exactly as I dictate." He exhaled softly. "Go ahead." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. The words poured out calm and deliberate, every sentence a stone laid in the wall between me and the past. "Dear Helen, Michael, and Claire, the man you discarded at my farewell party no longer exists. What remains has not forgotten. You judged me as a worthless old retiree, someone with no future, no value. You calculated that my time was over, and that my money was all that mattered. You have now discovered how much that miscalculation cost. There will be no second chance, no reconciliation, no financial rescue. You made your choices based on greed and convenience, now live with the consequences. Sincerely, Thomas Reed. I paused. That's the letter, but it needs something more. What do you mean? Jennings asked. A picture, I said. Something they can't unsee. That afternoon, Marianne, Lucas, and I stood in front of the stone house on the vineyard. The sun was setting behind us, painting the sky in gold and violet. Lucas held Scout's leash proudly, the golden retriever wagging at his side. Marianne wore a simple dress, her smile radiant. I wore jeans and a flannel shirt clothes that felt like freedom, not armor. We laughed naturally, the photographer catching the joy as though it had been waiting all along. When the prints came back, I chose one and wrote on the back in my own hand, "The Reed Family, Austin, 2025, built on loyalty, not greed." Jennings sent the letter and the photo by certified mail. One copy to Helen's duplex, one to Michael's failing address, and one to Claire through her lawyer. 3 weeks later, Jennings called me, his voice tinged with both disbelief and fascination. "Thomas, your letter caused an impact." I smiled faintly. "Tell me." Helen called my office 46 times in the first day, desperate, begging for even a single conversation. She says she's sorry, that she was misled, that she needs you. I said nothing. Michael wrote another letter. 12 pages, Thomas. More confession than plea. He admits he betrayed you, admits he followed his mother's lead. He says he's losing everything, his house, his marriage, his children's future. He's asking for forgiveness. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I could see the boy he had been, running in the yard with scraped knees. But then I remembered the man he had become, shrugging at me while his mother tore my life apart. "And Claire?" I asked. Jennings hesitated. "She came in person. She cried in my office, said you were right, that she was wrong to take sides. She told me to tell you that you've won, that you were never the weak man they believed you were. She even said she was proud of you, but she knows it's too late." When I showed her the photograph, she stared at it for almost 5 minutes. Then she said, "He looks 20 years younger. I never saw him smile like that with us." She left in silence after that. I turned to look at Marianne and Lucas playing outside, their laughter drifting through the vineyard rows. A strange calm settled over me. "They finally understand," I said quietly. "Yes," Jennings replied. "But Thomas, may I ask, did it bring you satisfaction?" I considered the question carefully. Did their suffering give me joy? No. Did their regret heal the wounds? Not exactly. What it gave me was something purer. "Not satisfaction," I said. "Closure. For 5 years I carried the weight of betrayal like a stone in my chest. Today that stone is gone, not because they suffer, but because I built something better." Jennings was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "So this is truly the end?" "Yes," I replied. "The chapter is closed." That night I sat on the porch with Marianne beside me and Lucas curled against Scout at our feet. The stars spread across the Texas sky, vast and endless. For the first time since that fateful party, I felt no trace of bitterness, only peace. Helen, Michael, and Claire had finally learned the cost of betrayal, and I had finally found the reward of resilience. Time has a way of softening even the sharpest wounds, though not always in the way people expect. 2 years passed after the letter, and with it came the final reports from Jennings. Helen's voice had grown quieter. The call stopped. The pleas ended. She lost the duplex in Austin when she couldn't keep up with rent. Eventually, she moved into a government-subsidized senior housing facility on the outskirts of San Marcos. Jennings told me she rarely leaves her room, that the woman who once draped herself in silk and diamonds now wears faded sweaters and speaks to no one. Michael, stripped of his ambitions, accepted work as a low-level accountant in a small tax office in Waco. He commutes daily in a used sedan that sputters on the highway, far from the luxury lifestyle he once imagined. His wife left him during the financial collapse, taking their children. He writes to Jennings sometimes, still hoping for advice, but his letters remain unopened on my desk. Claire fared differently. After the galleries closed and the lawsuits buried her in debt, she returned to school at 41. She trained as an art teacher and now works in a modest elementary school outside Austin. Jennings told me she seems happier than before, humbled, perhaps even grateful to have something steady. In her case, I do not wish her harm, but the distance remains. As for me at 67, I rise each morning to laughter echoing through the vineyard. Lucas, now a young man of 16, has blossomed into everything I once dreamed my children would be: hardworking, kind, and unspoiled by entitlement. He recently earned a full scholarship to a prestigious prep program, his talent in mathematics already attracting attention from universities. He calls me Dad without hesitation, and every time I hear it, I am reminded that fatherhood is not about blood, it is about presence and loyalty. Marianne's Cafe has expanded into 3 thriving locations across Austin, each one a haven for readers, dreamers, and families. She is writing her first book, something she once thought impossible. Our vineyard thrives, producing wine that carries our family name with quiet pride. Sometimes visitors ask about my past, about my children, about Helen. I tell them only this: I once believed family was defined by DNA. Now I know it is defined by choice. And when I walk through the vineyard rows at dusk, Scout running ahead, Lucas beside me, and Marianne's hand warm in mine, I understand the truth. I had to lose everything to learn. The greatest revenge is not in destroying those who betrayed you. The greatest revenge is building a life so full, so rich in love and loyalty, that they become irrelevant. Helen, Michael, and Claire chose greed, and it consumed them. I chose resilience, and it saved me. Family is not a birthright. It is a privilege, and it is built day by day through loyalty, respect, and love. That is my true story from Austin.